Welcome to Design Domination, where you'll gain confidence, clarity, and a competitive edge in a crowded marketplace so you can dominate your competition. Hi, and thanks for tuning in. I'm Colleen Gratzer, and in this episode of Design Domination, I'm answering a question I get asked a lot, and that is, how do I check if my PDF is accessible? Now, this question came about because I recently polled designers on my email list and I asked them for their burning accessibility questions so that I could address them in an episode, kind of like an Ask Me Anything format. Well, I got some really great questions and a few of them warranted having their own episode, so here we are. So today I'm going to cover, how do I know for sure, how can I actually be confident that my accessible PDFs are truly accessible? Now, this is a really great question, so stick around to find out 5 different ways to check if a PDF is accessible. So you can stop guessing and you'll know that your PDF is actually accessible. But I'll also talk about 2 things that many designers do wrong when assessing a PDF for accessibility. Now, it's important in this area of document accessibility work to make sure that your PDFs are accessible because it affects your business. I mean, first off, a lot of designers have issues with confidence, and that affects how you show up in your marketing and even how you price. And I know because I lived that for many years. And if you're not confident, you will not market yourself well, and you will not sound confident on sales calls. And that will make it less likely that you get the work. Okay, and you also might underprice your work on top of that, which can devalue it in the eyes of the client. But also, many clients have legal requirements for this work. So it's vital to make sure you know that you're actually delivering what you're supposed to. You don't want to be losing sleep at night worrying about whether or not you met the client's requirements and if the work was done right or not. Okay, so stop wondering once and for all if your documents are accessible. And let's dive into several different important factors to determine if they're accessible or not. The first thing you need to do at the start of every project is to define accessible. So in other words, you have to know what accessible means to this client for this project. And I say for this project because I have a lot of clients who aren't the end client, and they have different clients, and one project might be for client A and another for client B, and they may have completely different accessibility requirements. So finding out what accessible means to each client sets the bar for how accessible a PDF needs to be. I mean, if you don't know what their requirements are to begin with, how can you meet them, right? Reminds me of the quote by Steve Maraboli. If you don't know where you're going, how will you know when you get there? For instance, you might have a client who calls for WCAG 2.0 AA as their standard that they want to meet, right? You might have a client who needs to meet WCAG 2.1 or 2.2 AA. I've also had clients specify both WCAG 2.1 AA and PDF UA. PDF UA is more specific to PDFs than WCAG is. But I've also had a few clients who say that they're looking to meet, WCAG 2.1 AA, but when it comes to contrast, they want to adhere to the AAA level of conformance just for contrast, because that AAA level is stricter. So accessible means different things to different clients. Okay, so that's number 1. The second thing is that your PDF should pass the Acrobat accessibility checker. Like at a minimum, this is just a starting point. And I say starting point because the Acrobat checker is an automated checker. And it's important to know that automated checkers are not the end-all be-all for accessibility. That's because they cannot detect all potential accessibility issues. Contrast, reading order, if the correct tag was used. And of the issues that they can detect, they cannot tell if certain things were done properly, such as, is that the right tag that was used? Is that alt text sufficient on that image? Is it correct? Things like that. Now, I talked about the limitations of the Acrobat Accessibility Checker in episode 88, so be sure to check that out. Now, this might come as a surprise to you, but lots of documents can pass the Acrobat Accessibility Checker and be filled with accessibility issues. Okay, it's important to note, though, that every time you export to PDF from your source program, whether that's InDesign or Word or something else, you will see certain errors after running the Acrobat checker before you do any of the final PDF accessibility work. And that's always going to be the case, even if you did all that you could in the source program. So there's always more work to be done after the PDF passes the Acrobat checker. But after you do make those final tweaks, the PDF should pass the checker, at least other than for table summaries. I actually turn that option off before I run the Acrobat checker. But you still have to do other checks as well. So let's get into them. And that brings me to number 3. So another barometer for assessing whether or not a PDF is accessible is to run and pass the pack checker. Now, this is a much more comprehensive checker than the Acrobat checker. It looks under the hood at a lot more things than the Acrobat checker does. But again, this is an automated checker, and automated checkers are not 100%. And again, they can also not determine certain things, such as if the right tags were used, or if the reading order or the alt text is correct. Those always have to be manually checked. So it's another tool in your toolkit to help as part of the checking process. Now, after I get a PDF to pass the pack checker, I download the report and I send it to the client usually. And the Acrobat checker also allows you to output a report as well, but it really doesn't mean that much. So I don't even bother with that one. Now, number 4 has to do with manual checks. It is absolutely necessary to perform manual checks in your PDFs. And by that, I mean going through and actually inspecting the tags, the reading order, the alt text, any actual text that has been set, and so forth. And there's a few more things to check too, but no automated checker can tell if those things were done correctly. Number 5 has to do with performing keyboard and screen reader checks. So you'll want to do these, you want to test with the keyboard and with the screen reader, because that's going to give you a good basis for your testing. There are lots of assistive devices and software out there, and you simply won't have access to them all. The keyboard, though, is important to test with because many assistive technologies still make use of the keyboard. And beyond that, many people with fine motor issues may not use a mouse and can only use the keyboard. When you're able to access the content by using the keyboard and not a mouse, it's called keyboard accessible. Okay, so keyboard accessibility is very important. A screen reader, which is one of several types of assistive technology, depends on keyboard accessibility. Screen readers such as NVDA and JAWS, they will allow you to hear how some of the content in the PDF is voiced. And if you're not used to how a screen reader voices certain content, you may be surprised. So some content, may be voiced completely differently than you expected to. It may not be voiced at all when it should be, or it may be voiced when it shouldn't be. And if something is voiced differently or not at all, that may change the meaning of the content, which would not be a good scenario. If, for example, if you use non-standard bullets for your lists, they might voice as letters. And hearing letters such as N voiced before each bulleted item may not make sense to someone who cannot see the content, but hearing the word bullet before each list item would make sense and would be, expected behavior. Now, having said all of this, I want to warn you about something so it doesn't trip you up if you see it. Don't ever assume that if you add the PDF UA identifier to the PDF, or if you open a PDF and see that PDF UA identifier, that it is some stamp of approval of accessibility for the document. Now, when I first got into document accessibility, I thought this was a meaningful marker for a PDF, but it's not. It makes the document look more official, sure, but it really doesn't hold any weight. I mean, anyone can add it at any time to the PDF, and it can also be removed at any time. So whatever you do, don't open up a PDF, look for that icon and think, oh, this document has the PDF UA identifier. It must have been checked and passed some tests and has been knighted as accessible. Okay, so there you have it. 5 ways to check if a PDF is truly accessible or not, starting with defining the standard for what is considered accessible and performing different types of checks along with that warning. If you need help creating accessible PDFs from InDesign and you're ready to stop Googling and guessing and piecing together information from different sources, be sure to check out my Accessible PDFs from InDesign course. You'll get the complete process for creating accessible PDFs from InDesign. Just go to creative-boost.com/InDesign course.